Pēnei Hanare.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity. Let's hope the action on the field come Rugby World Cup is a little bit more lively than this debate at the moment. I would have expected the lead member of the bill to at least have some sort of sports analogy, or it was a game of two halves, or some sort of comment of that nature. But what we are looking forward to, Mr. Speaker, is the progression of this bill to allow exactly what Mr. Seymour has mentioned, this country to share in its most favourite of pastimes, and that is sport, and in this particular instance, rugby. Mr. Speaker, can I also echo the comments already made in thanking the Justice and Electoral Select Committee, of which I am proud to be a member. It was almost like rugby training, where, you know, some of us were fair weather trainers. You know, you only go out when the sun comes out, and you don't want to actually train in the rain, but we were all committed to this cause. We come together at odd hours and on non-sitting days, and I commend those in the Select Committee, and of course the leadership from Jackie Dean of the Select Committee. Can I also commend to the member, Mr. Seymour, for his rather open-minded approach when coming to the Select Committee to present his bill. He did actually come sort of like with a magna doodle, if you like, and he had a bit of a clean slate, and he was actually quite prepared to take a fair amount of criticism. He was prepared to take a fair amount of challenge during the robust process held through the Select Committee, and to his credit, he was able to just simply shake that magna doodle, and we got to draw and draft the bill that we have in front of the House today. So thank you to the Select Committee. Mr. Speaker, the main purpose, and it's been talked about very technically by the member Jackie Dean, but one of the main purposes of this particular bill is to ease, if you like, the administrative burden placed upon, in particular, those local authorities in regulating and policing and also granting and administering liquor licences and the applications for special occasions or special events. So what this does is it'll lump it all together. We'll call it the Rugby World Cup. We'll make it an opportunity where most places and most communities will come together, whether it's at a pub or local pub, at a local rugby club or a local sports club, to enjoy watching rugby. Now, it just so happens that we all know that the Rugby World Cup will be held over in England. Therefore, there is a time difference here, and we want to provide the opportunity for as many people as possible to get out and enjoy that. And what better way to foster community spirit and community togetherness, if you like, by bringing them all together, allowing them to enjoy the rugby at their local rugby club or at their local pub. Mr. Speaker, there were, and it's already been mentioned, a significant number of submissions. I must admit that there was some dismay amongst the Select Committee that we weren't going to open up to hear oral submissions. However, we allowed for written submissions and considered written submissions. There were a number. Some of those who did submit, Mr. Speaker, were the New Zealand Medical Association, the Women's Refuge, district health boards, and local authorities. Most of them, and it needs to be pointed out here, most of them objected, well, you know, their submissions were an objection to this bill. And for quite simple reasons, and some of those have already been mentioned. There is, sadly, a binge drinking culture in our country, in particular amongst our young people, and recent statistics have told us that it's an increasing concern amongst women. The binge drinking culture in this country often is fostered around sport and tertiary institutions. So there were major concerns from those key stakeholders who were responsible ultimately for, one, administering the applications for these types of special occasions and for these events to be hosted, but also those at the other end who are there picking up the pieces after a long night. So I want to acknowledge all of those who did make submissions. The Select Committee considered them all, and of course went through robust debate on many of the points, and I think what has come from it is a bill that does actually look after or take into consideration, serious consideration, many of the submissions, things around noise, things around proximity to schools and to community spaces, while also considering, one, our joy of watching rugby, and also two, encouraging the hospitality sector to remind them, if you like, of their host responsibilities. And I also hope that what this bill will do, given the times that we are extending the hours for, will encourage many of the licensed premises to come up with innovative ways to engage those people who do choose to come along to watch the rugby, to have a breakfast or coffee, a breakfast club. I know it sounds like a bit of an old thing, of the breakfast club. It's even a bit before my time. Mr. Naylor might recall breakfast club. But you know, it does allow scope for innovative ways to include the community. And when I say the community, I want to talk a little bit about extending the games from 16 to cover all of the games. And the reason for that is when we look across our communities, and this is certainly the case right across the country, in all of our towns and cities, is that we're so diverse. We're multicultural, multi-ethnic. While everybody in the country, I'm sure, supports black and supports the All Blacks at heart, you know, there's a little bit of Irish in some, there's a little bit of Scottish in some, and certainly indeed in Auckland, there's a strong Pacific Island community. And we want to be able to encourage them to come together, to be able to watch their particular team, not just to limit them to watching the All Blacks, but to allow them to celebrate with their team. I know the member, Jackie Dean, mentioned about dressing up like kids in costume, but actually that's part of the fun of it. You'll recall the Rugby World Cup hosted by our great country. South Auckland was painted in Tongan red. Flag sales went through the roof, and we want to encourage that kind of community spirit to get behind their team, and not just to limit them to watching the All Blacks. Mr. Speaker, the bill, it was actually a game of two halves. And we know that it was turned down the first time, it got through the second time. There was robust debate right through the select committee process. Some of the more technical things around such things as technology. So it was highlighted that, well, what's to stop one particular place just turning a very small TV on in the corner while everybody gets drunk and nobody's actually watching the rugby. So, you know, there were some technical points on defining what the technology kinds of technology that may be used to show the game, to screen the game. Also some very tight restrictions around those who have outdoor premises, and around the noise, and I've already mentioned proximity to community spaces and to schools. I think this is a good thing. I'm supporting it, and I'd like to thank Mr. Seymour for bringing this bill to the House. And finally, just finish by saying, go the mighty All Blacks. Kia ora.